Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the 2021 PAC Basketball Preview Show. I'm Rob McKinney alongside PAC contributor and broadcaster Donnie Chedrick. This first show is centered around the women's conference. We will get to the men's conference in another episode. But before we discuss teams, key players, and 2021 league changes, we're going to send it to Randy Gore, who's standing with PAC Commissioner Joe Onderko. Randy?
Thank you, Rob. As we continue along here with the PAC Sports Network Basketball Preview Show, we're joined now by PAC Commissioner Joe Onderko. Joe, thanks so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule.
Thanks, Randy. Always good to join you and always good to talk PAC basketball.
Now, obviously, a lot of questions to get into here for PAC basketball. And with this being, the preview show, we figured it'd be best to tip things off with the commissioner and answer some of those type of questions. And really, it's been a changing world because of COVID-19 over the course of the last year. What's it been like for the PAC office during the course of the last 7 to 8 months?
Well, I think like everybody else, it's probably the biggest professional challenge any of us have ever faced. It's, this is my 29th year in college athletics and my 15th as commissioner. And I certainly know I've never experienced anything like this or dealt with challenges like this. This is unprecedented for all of us. And it's been it's been maddening, frustrating. You take 2 steps forward and then 3 steps back. You think you have a solution and then another problem pops up. And I'm not saying that for sympathy because, what we're dealing with in the grand scheme of things is minimal compared to people losing businesses and jobs and just the incredible challenges people not just in our region but our nation are dealing with. But from to answer your question, from a strictly athletic standpoint, it's an incredible challenge for us and I think especially with basketball, because quite frankly, with the possible exception of wrestling, I don't think there's a sport that brings us more challenges with dealing with the COVID pandemic than what we have with basketball for a number of reasons that I'm sure we'll talk about.
Now, with this being the PAC Basketball Preview Show, obviously there is a plan to play ball. Tell us when the schedule will begin.
Yeah, we're moving forward. We tentatively plan to begin contests on Saturday, January 23rd. It will be a very limited schedule in the first couple of weeks. Not every PAC team will be competing in the first couple of weeks. That's due to variations on when kids are coming back to campus, what campus protocols are for like campus quarantine when they return, the amount of practice time they need to get ready. We decided basically that we're going to let teams start when they're able to start. So we surveyed all 10 of our schools. We found out when their start date is, and we basically kind of put together a schedule that's more of an art form than a science of trying to, find something that works that allows those teams that are ready early to still play, but doesn't force anybody to play before they're ready, and all the while shooting towards what's a little bit of a moving target, which is trying to get our tournament done in time to determine a champion for the national tournament. Now, we say that not even knowing if there's going to be a national tournament. That decision is probably not going to be made by the NCAA until the end of January. And depending on where they go, that could potentially impact some things at the end of our schedule, including what our tournament dates are going to be. But, like everything else in the pandemic, Randy, we're taking it day by day. We're making the best decisions we can with the information we have. We're trying to be nimble and adjust quickly where it's necessary. And at the same time, just kind of keeping our eyes on the prize, which is to give our great basketball players, our great student athletes in this league, the best experience we can in a really difficult environment.
Now, inevitably, there's going to be some postponements along the way. How will the conference handle those type of events?
Yeah, I think we'd be Pollyanna-ish to not think we're going to get through this unscathed, just seeing what's going on in Division I, especially the NBA. More than likely we're going to have games postponed and probably canceled because of COVID. As I mentioned, we have a limited time period if we're going to have a tournament and have someone compete for the national championship. Now, if that would change, that probably changes our rescheduling policy a little bit too. If there ends up not being a national tournament, now maybe you have a week or two at the end of the season for like makeups. Okay, well, these 2 teams couldn't play here because one had COVID, but we can reschedule them and get that in. That may be possible. It may not. We just don't know. If we're not able to reschedule games, there's just simply going to be no contests. They're not going to be included in the conference standings. And that's okay because we are planning on a tournament That's going to include everybody. And because of that, nobody is going to feel like we are not going to be able to compete for a championship because we lost games due to COVID, if that makes sense. So I mean, it's not ideal, it's not perfect, but I think it's the best we can do under the circumstances.
And as far as how those impact the standings, any cancellations, if you will, the standings I would assume would be, or as far as seeding would be decided upon by win percentage.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, we would seed by win percentage. And so people say, so it's definitely a 10-team tournament. I said, well, it could be a 10-team tournament if all 10 teams are eligible. I mean, if you get to the last weekend of the regular season and then all of a sudden a team gets shut down for COVID, we may have a school or two that says we just can't compete in the tournament for health reasons. And that's really unfortunate, but it's also nothing any of us can control, either the schools or the conference. So I think we will, but yes, all things in a perfect world, we get to the end of the regular season and all 10 teams are still competing. We're going to have a 10-team tournament, which means you'll have a couple of play-in games, a 7-10 and an 8-9 game on Monday, and then our normal formats for both men and women moving forward. Again, we need to be nimble here. I really want to stress that to everybody watching this. You may see a plan and it may change, and it may change on short notice. But again, understand what the goal is here. And that is, we want to be able to crown a champion on the court in the fairest and most the best way we can to provide opportunities for kids and not have them be punished for things outside their control.
And I know at the high school level, the PIAA back in the fall, when they were trying to make their decisions on whether to proceed or not with high school sports, they felt that they would be remiss to not at least try to play. And they were able to see the end of the fall sports to fruition. And they're working, of course, on the winter. Was that kind of the mindset of the PAC, is that, the conference would be remiss to at least not try?
100%. That's exactly our mentality. And knowing that as part of that, you may try and you could potentially fail, and we all have that fear within us that, we're going to have things happen that we can't control and is not going to allow us to reach our goal. But I think we have to try. I think we owe it to our student athletes who have undergone an incredibly difficult 9 months. We have to, if there is a way to thread this needle, we're going to try to thread it. That's probably the best way. And our schools are taking extraordinary steps to make that happen. A lot of fans may not know the amount of COVID testing that is required of our athletes. Our basketball players are tested 3 times per week for COVID once we get into game situations. That's an NCAA recommendation that we are following. We have protocols for testing officials to keep them healthy and safe. Our health and safety working group has put together protocols for travel, for locker rooms, for access and egress, and all these types of things that you just don't think about, or that we just kind of take for granted if we're not in a pandemic, that you can't take for granted. You've really got to talk these things through and have a plan for everything. So the fact that they have jumped through all these hoops and they've taken these incredible steps and quite frankly incurred a good bit of cost that our schools have absorbed, it's because they want to try. They want to do everything possible to make this a reality for our student athletes.
And obviously, basketball season on the horizon. There is still a plan to play the fall sports season, or at least an abbreviated one, in the spring, and then also continue on with spring sports. So the spring could be very busy in the PAC, and that's obviously a great problem to have. But I guess tell us a little bit about the plan on what you're looking at for fall and spring sports.
Yeah, you said it exactly right. We are planning on a fall sports season in the spring, a limited one. It will not be the same extent as what you would see in a normal year, probably about 50%, and that applies for football, for soccer, for volleyball. We're going to have a limited spring cross-country season, and then we're going to roll into spring, and hopefully we're going to try to get that as close to normal as we can. And I say that, with kind of parentheses around it, because, nothing's going to be really normal until we reach herd immunity and get everything back to where it was. But what I mean by that is we're going to, I think baseball and softball and lacrosse are going to be playing a significant number of contests. Really the one change we've made across the board, and whether it's fall, winter, spring, we're going to be staying in conference and everything. You're not going to have out-of-conference play, and that's going to still be the case in the spring sports. So we're expanding the number of contests they're going to play against each other within the PAC. because we feel like we can just control that better. You know, Randy, the one advantage we really have over a lot of D3 conferences is our geographic footprint. You know, to have 10 schools within essentially a 2-hour drive of each other really allows us some flexibility to do some things that some other leagues can't, and gives us probably a little better chance of success because of that. You know, along with that, just the professionalism and the dedication of our presidents, our ADs, our coaches. And I really want to shout out to our athletic trainers, the work they've done to try to make this a reality. You know, again, that advantage of us being so tight, we really feel like, especially once we get to the spring, we can get that as close to normal as we possibly can, given the parameters around us.
The new normal, as it's often heard.
Yeah, I say normal. That's why I put parentheses around normal.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Now, I know this has been a difficult year for you, Deputy Commissioner Kevin Fenstermacher, all the administrators and athletic directors in the PAC. How have you guys held up personally? I mean, I know it's been difficult. Have you guys held up okay?
as well as I guess you could hope for. You know, I've been very blessed personally. You know, we've been largely unscathed as a family by COVID, and I know there's many people I know and people I grew up with and friends that have not been so fortunate. And so, you know, we hold on tight to each other. We hold on to our faith. We've been fortunate that my kids have been able to basically keep a fairly normal schedule with their schools. I think the hardest part, Randy, it's not the hours. It's the frustration of doing a lot of work knowing this may not come to fruition, or we may do all these things right, and then something outside of our control happens, and it all goes away. And we've had that happen a couple of times during this. I got to tell you, that's professionally, that's a really tough thing to deal with. But at the same time, you know, all we can do is control what we can control. I sound like a coach talking here, but it's really the truth. And the things we can't control, we can't take personally, and that's really hard when you feel like it's your responsibility to get these kids back on the playing field or the court or back in competition, and for a number of reasons you're unable to do so. So thank you for asking that. Yeah, we're holding up fine. You know, Fenstermacher keeps me sane, and I keep him insane. That's how we say it. So.
Very good. Well, Joe, again, thank you for joining us. This is PAC Commissioner Joe Onderko on the air with us here to kick off our PAC basketball preview show. So, again, Joe, thanks so much for your time, and good luck to you in the conference the rest of the way.
I appreciate it, Randy. Great to have you back on board this year, and looking forward to hopefully a great year.
That's celebrating our 10th anniversary with the PAC Sports Network. So excited to get this season underway. So that'll do it now with PAC Commissioner Joe Onderko. We'll turn it back over to Rob McKinney.
Thanks, Randy, and thanks, Joe. Tremendous insight from the commissioner on the upcoming season. Major takeaways is that there's going to be a staggered start and that all 10 teams will enter the PAC tournament. And again, we welcome in Donnie Chedrick. And Donnie, let's get right into the review of the teams, and we're going to start it off with the Waynesburg University Yellow Jackets.
Well, Rob, thanks for having me. And to start with Waynesburg, of course, our alma mater, the Lady Yellow Jackets last season, not a great one. They did advance in the PAC tournament. They got a victory over Westminster. Or I'm sorry, they lost to Westminster, but they did advance to that round with a win over Bethany. 8-19 last season, 6-10 in conference play. Third in the PAC in scoring, which is a nice touch. But defensively, they were eighth, second to last team, allowing points, 77.8 points allowed per game. A couple of key departures here, Rob. Allie Delaney, 27 games, 19 starts in 2019. She averaged 12 points per game. She shot pretty well from beyond the arc, 33.9% from three-point land. So that's a big loss. She's actually gone on to begin her own coaching career. Erin Joyce, another loss. And she was somebody who stayed pretty consistent in her time at Waynesburg. She started, her last 2 or 3 years. She got significant playing time all 4 years while with the Yellow Jackets. 25 games played last year. 23 of those being starts. She averaged just over 5 points per game, but she facilitated the offense pretty well. 3.7 assists per game. That was tied for second in the President's Athletic Conference. So those are 2 losses on both sides of the basketball for the Jackets. But the key returners, Brooke Fuller is going to be the big part of this Waynesburg women's basketball offense, second team all PAC last year, 16.1 points per game. That was good enough for number 6 in the PAC. Nearly 9 rebounds per game, checking in at 8.7. That was 4th in the PAC. And she had the best field goal percentage as well. So she takes smart shots. She doesn't shoot it from too far outside. But when she does, it goes in 54.8% of the time. At least it did last year, and that was the tops in the conference. Andrea Orlowski, another player to look for, 11.1 points per game last year, 7.8 rebounds per game. She gets it done defensively as well. She's been one of the leaders on this squad over the last few seasons. 71.1% from the line. She was the only Waynesburg player with over 100 free throw attempts on the year. She made 96 out of 135. Sam Jones still at the helm, so the consistency there with the head coaching. And then a key member of his staff is the grad assistant, Jess Vormelker. We knew her better as a player for the Teal Tomcats. I used to call her the Black Mamba of PAC women's basketball because she was one of the best women's basketball players in the PAC, perhaps the best that we saw in our time broadcasting and watching her play. According to Coach Jones, the girls love her because she's just one of them. You know, she's only a few years older than some of these girls, and she even faced a few of them as a player.
Yeah, and that was actually a perfect segue, Donnie, into the Teal Tomcats, which we will be talking about next. But, you know, Jess Vormelker was just so much fun to watch. And the one thing about the Yellow Jackets is that they always seem to have a big down low that plays well between the blocks, and a really sneaky team that can shoot it from beyond the arc as well. So we'll definitely keep an eye on the Yellow Jackets. But as I mentioned, we'll go into the Teal Tomcats, led by Rob Clune, who's a savvy vet coaching wise in the PAC. And last year for the Teal Tomcats, Donnie, it wasn't pretty. They did not win a game. They were 0-25 and 0-16 in PAC play. They're currently on a 25-game losing streak. But, you know, as we mentioned in years past with Jess Vormelker and a lot of really talented athletes to come from that program, you know, they can right the ship and they can turn things around rather quickly, especially with a veteran coach. So I'm excited to see what this team is going to be able to do this year. Some of the bright spots is the fact that they added 6 freshmen. And I think one of the keys to that is developing that young core that can stay consistent throughout the 4 years and try to use that veteran leadership that you have to kind of groom them. Now, they're still a very young team, led by 2 individuals. Returning is Rachel Breckenridge, averaged about 9 points per game, scored a season high of 22 points last year. And she's been a great facilitator for that team, has been someone who's shown some flashes and can carry that leadership torch with the Tomcats heading into this season. And one of the keys, and Donnie, I think we definitely need to talk about this, is the return of Bethany Johnson. She wasn't able to play a lot last year. She had a tremendous freshman campaign. And we were saying at the beginning of last year and the end of 2 years ago that she was going to be somebody we would circle each and every week, every game. She uses her size tremendously. She's extremely talented down low. She can shoot the ball well. Freshman campaign, 12 points per game. And last year she had a season high of 21 points, but unfortunately didn't play the majority of that season. So if you have somebody who is young still, who can come in and give you some leadership despite not playing as much last year, helping out a lot of the freshmen, but also carrying the torch offensively and to become that staple that I think they've missed ever since Jess Vormelker. And, you know, she's done a great job with the Yellow Jackets. And it's interesting to see how the Tomcats will respond this season after not winning a game last year.
Yeah, Rob, I think after Jess Vormelker left, the moment that happened, I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that it became Bethany Johnson's team. And it's kind of a shame that, you know, she missed almost all of last season with an injury. But if she's back and she's healthy, she's that leader that the Teal Tomcats need, because as you said, she was tremendous as a freshman. She was the freshman of the year in the PAC, the same season that Jess Vormelker won player of the year in the PAC. So I think if the Tomcats can have Johnson for a full slate of games in 2021, and I know it's an abbreviated schedule with everything going on, they might be able to take a game or two.
Yeah, they absolutely could. And I'm excited to see her progress and see how she can rebound. And, you know, speaking of tremendous and using those words to describe players, we'll use that word to describe a team, and that's W&J. They always seem to have a really solid record in the PAC. tend to do very well against teams outside of the PAC as well, always competing for the top spot. And Dottie, you're just going to have to tell us about them and what can we expect from the Presidents this season.
18-10 last year, 11-5 in conference, a 2-point loss against Grove City in that PAC title game, which was a great game. And they got redemption in the PAC playoffs. They blew out St. Vincent in the semifinals after losing to them in the title game in 2018 by a wide margin. They beat the Bearcats 74-53. I think this President's team could be the favorite to win the PAC in 2021. Plenty of returning talent, a strong group of seniors. Ali Cito, I think, could possibly be the PAC Player of the Year, or at least someone to look out for. She started all 28 games last season. Second team all PAC, which I was surprised by that. I thought for sure that Cito should have been a first team member. Nearly 17 points per game. She was fifth in the PAC in scoring, 9.8 rebounds per game. That's good enough for third. She shot 86.1% from the line, best in the PAC, 2.4 steals per game. That was sixth in the PAC. Even had over a block per game. That was good enough for fourth. She could do it all. She can play every part of the floor, offensively and defensively. I think she's one of the best players in the conference. Lauren Gilbert, she's had some injury issues, but an honorable mention all PAC player last season, 13 points per game, shoots over 83% from the line, 35% three-point shooter, nearly 3 assists per game, a very good floor general. That was something that Coach Gina DeRubo was targeting whenever Lauren Gilbert came in a few years ago out of Baldwin. She was 7th in the PAC in assists. So I think if Gilbert can stay healthy for the length of the season, I know we just talked about Destiny Johnson, but Gilbert can be a vital part of that President's offense. And Hannah Johnston, too, as a third senior to mention, 8.7 points per game last year, shot nearly 39% from three, 19 out of 49 attempts. But limited losses for this W&J squad. Megan Williams was the only senior to graduation. And let's not forget the head coach. Gina DeRubo is the most decorated head coach in PAC women's basketball, maybe in all of PAC basketball, has won 70% of her games at W&J. First coach in the PAC in both men's or women's to win 400 games. She did that a few years ago. 15 20-win seasons. 12 of them have been at W&J. The other 3 whenever she was a coach at Bethany. A 7-time PAC Coach of the Year. So a great coach, a great lineup returning in 21. I think W&J could be the team that could knock off Grove City as the new queens of the President's Athletic Conference in women's basketball.
Yeah, Coach DeRubo, she's done a great job with that team ever since, we started covering and well before that as well. And, this W&J team, not a lot of teams can say that they can return a lot of starters, a lot of key players. And the Presidents certainly are one of our favorites in the PAC. And we're going to progress here now to the Geneva Golden Tornadoes, and a team that did not do that well last year. However, a few times that we covered them, Donnie, they look solid. I mean, they competed in a lot of their games. It seemed like under the new bench boss, Michael Grinder, they were trying to develop a new style, which I'll get into. But overall, really talented athletes. 2-14 last year in the PAC, 3-21 overall. Didn't speak to the development of that team, and I think we're going to see a much different team this year. But I would be remiss, and was talking to PAC owner Randy Gore before we went live here, and I did want to talk about the tragic passing of Lori Wynn back in April. She was the longtime head coach for the Geneva Golden Tornadoes on the women's basketball side, and her passing really struck most of us, all of us, and pretty much anybody who knows the PAC, because she has been a valued contributor not only to this network, but to the conference, to the players and their families, and the entire community as well. She is a tremendous person, somebody who we really enjoyed working with and covering. And one thing I do have to say about Lori is that she was on a call with me in the playoffs, and she looked at me before the game and she said, "I'm nervous." And I was like, "Lori, you've had so many big games. This has to be something that you could just easily accomplish." And she said no. And we talked about it, and she got really comfortable throughout the broadcast, and she gave me a lot of great compliments at the end. She complimented the network and how great of a job we've done covering, and she was just so kind-hearted, and was just really embracing the opportunity to be on air, and she did a fantastic job. And I was really looking forward to doing more games with her, but unfortunately, she did pass here in April. So our thoughts and prayers to her family and the Geneva community. But with that being said, the new head coach, Michael Grinder, has really instilled some confidence in this team. I mean, they're trying to play faster. I spoke with him prior to last season, and I said, what do we need to know about you? And he said, I'd like to play a fast-styled offense, be aggressive defensively, but I have to push the ball as quickly as possible from one side of the court to the other. And really, the team begins and ends with Lauren Tipton. She was absolutely sensational last year. She broke the single game scoring record last year by dropping 40 points against Teal, and that's the game that the PAC network covered and I covered. She averaged just over 18 points per game, 12 rebounds per game, so averaged a double-double. She was named NCCAA Women's Basketball Player of the Week and the PAC Player of the Week following that 40-point performance against Teal. Another one that really helped out was Emily Melnick throughout that entire season. She was extremely solid. She will be returning, averaged 11 points per game, knocked down 65 threes, which is second best in the PAC. So if they can get that fast-paced nature going, you get the head coach that is now returning in his second season, and you have two very talented offensive players. This could be a team that you might need to watch out for, and they may not be exactly there now, but with some of the freshmen that they brought in, they're going to make some noise.
Yeah, Rob, and I was at that game with you, the big Lauren Tipton performance, and I think I compared her to Shaquille O'Neal in 2001 because that was the type of game that she had that night. And she absolutely has to be the go-to player in this Geneva offense. And this is another case of a team that could be on a slow rise. You can't expect to see a team go from near the bottom all the way to the top in 1 year because, unless something drastic happens to your team or some of the other teams, that just won't be the normal progression. But I think Geneva can build a slow rise out of this team that they have.
Yeah. And the one thing that stood out about that game, Donnie, before we move on, is we were in somewhat of disbelief because it just seemed so easy. It seemed like nobody was able to stop her. And when she got the ball, she scored. Her shooting percentage that game was through the roofs, and one of the best I've personally seen, especially covering these athletes here on the PAC Sports Network. But we're going to traverse now to the next team, and we're going to talk about a team that seems to always compete every year in and out of tournament play and making runs at the championship, and just a rich history, and that's the St. Vincent Bearcats.
Well, this was the team that was at the top of the PAC for a few years, but just could never get over that hump. But they finally did back in 2018. Last season, however, 19-7, 15-1 in PAC play, very poised for a title defense when it came to late February. A 3-point loss at Grove City was the only regular season conference loss for the Bearcats. But then it hit the semifinal round, and W&J got that redemption that I mentioned a few minutes ago, a 21-point loss in the PAC semifinals. But St. Vincent last year, nearly 77 points per game. They were the top scoring offense in the PAC. However, even with a couple of returning players, they lost a lot of experience and a lot of talent. This squad could take a step back. Now, Coach Jimmy Petruska, one of the best at his spot in the PAC. He always recruits very well. If he brings in a pretty strong class and has a couple of returning players that can help out here and there, that can help out with the top two that I would say he has right now, we could see St. Vincent back in their normal spot. But whenever you consider what was lost from this St. Vincent team, Madison Kolar, first team All-PAC, over 17 points per game, fourth in the conference, nearly 52% from the field, second in the conference, nearly 78% from the line, fourth in the conference. Kayla Slovanik was an honorable mention all-conference player, over 8.5 points per game, 33.8% from beyond the arc. Paige Montrose, her season was cut short due to a knee injury. She started 15 games. 7.4 points per game, 32 steals. She was a ball hawking defender. I don't know how many times you personally, Rob, got to see St. Vincent play, but she was always one of the most high intensity players on the floor with a very high basketball IQ. They also lost Taylor Boring, who was a 3-point threat, Aaron G. and Cola, Bree Van Volkenberg. The two players, though, coming back that are real bright spots for the Bearcats, Jenna Lafko, who you can't avoid that one, PAC Player of the Year in 2019, 13.8 points per game, which didn't lead the conference. In fact, it was near the bottom part of the top 10. She was 9th, but she was so good at every single spot on the floor. 50.9% from the field. That was 3rd in the conference. 3.7 assists per game, 2nd in the conference. 3 steals per game. That was tied for 1st. A 1.4 assist to turnover ratio. That's one of the top 3 in the conference. She was so electric when she was out on the floor. And even being a small player, she didn't make an impact down low in the post, but she could do so many different things offensively and defensively. Carly Kilgus, another player I want to highlight, over 7 points per game. She also was very good at moving the basketball around, 4.2 assists per game. That led the conference. She also led the conference in assist to turnover ratio at 2.4. And Jimmy Petruska, who I mentioned earlier, back for season number 11. He ranks among the top 20 among active coaches in winning percentage in all of D3. So you have that great coach at the helm. If you get another good recruiting class in, St. Vincent might not lose a step. We could consider it reloading instead of rebuilding. But if those pieces don't fit into place right away, it may be a rare rebuilding year for the Bearcats women's basketball program.
Yeah, but Donnie, the one thing I've learned over the years covering PAC, and especially the Bearcats, is you can never sleep on them. You can never doubt them. They'll always be right there in the thick of things. And that's been a consistent theme. And I think it's the discipline and the coaching that has, allowed that success to sustain over so many years. But now we'll move on to sustaining over the years is something I would say Roseanne Scott, the head coach of the Westminster Titans, is really good at. She has been a real rock with that team, extremely disciplined team. And this is a Titans program that is going to look much different this year than they did in years past. So last year they lost in the semifinals to Grove City. They only have one senior, Donnie, on the team this year, and that's Ashley Russell. And she averaged about 3 to 4 points per game. But they're going to rely heavily on Megan Polchinski. She averaged about 10 points per game last year, 2nd on the team in field goal percentage, and 1st in 3-pointers on the team. She made 35 with a shooting percentage of 34% beyond the line. And now this could get a little overwhelming to the Titans fans and those who are used to seeing this program. So they graduated 5 athletes and lost to 6th. And those competitors combined for 44.5 points per game. So that's how much they're losing. Now, granted, they're going to be welcoming 9 freshmen, one of the largest freshman class within this whole conference. But, when you lose that many starters and talented players that combine for that many points per game, 44.5, as I mentioned, that's going to be some holes that need to be filled. And we'll see if they can do that. Aaliyah Gage left. She averaged about 6 points per game. Brooke Lysick averaged about 6 points per game. Emily Fromneck, 9 points per game. Kayla Bennett, who was their leading scorer last year at 12.5 points per game. And, it's this program that's going to see change this year and upcoming years. And we see this every once in a while where these teams kind of go through this patch where they graduate a lot, they move on, especially a lot of starters. But that just gives a coaching staff maybe just a window to sort of see who they can bring in, what this team, what the dynamic, what the culture is going to be in the upcoming years, because you have 9 freshmen now. If they're all able to make an impact, then you'll have that sustained success from freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior year to really build that program around.
And it's promising that Coach Scott, who, by the way, won the PAC Coach of the Year award last season, brought in such a sizable freshman class, because something that we talked with her about a few seasons ago, this is probably 2 or 3, maybe even 4 years ago, is that she felt like she didn't have the program where she wanted it to be yet, and she lost a lot of recruits because of that. And she mentioned the Gina DeRubos of the PAC or the Jimmy Petruskas of the PAC, where their programs were doing so well, not to leave out Shelly Foose as well, because, you know, she has brought in a real crop of talent with Grove City, and I know you'll get to that. But she mentioned those programs bringing in so many in every freshman class that she would be left with bringing in a couple of girls each year. So nice to see that they have nearly 10 freshmen coming in for the Titans.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be a much different team, but I'm sure she's excited to work with them and to get that success sustained through multiple years. But switching gears again, Donnie, we're going to have you talk about the Bethany Bison. They found themselves on the bottom looking up, but not a throwaway season, I would say, by any standpoint last year. But, you know, this is a Bison team that has had success in years past, have taken a couple steps back, but now looking to make a statement this year.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think Bethany will be in around the same spot that this program was last season. It was a first-round playoff loss to Waynesburg by 14 points. This team is just so young. There isn't a single senior on this roster, and there are only 3 juniors. So that means the rest are freshmen and sophomores. So in a couple of years, we could see a pretty talented Bethany Bison team in PAC women's basketball. But 3 key departures to think about for Bethany. Allison Kuhn, 8.3 points per game, 5 rebounds per game. Haley Glass averaged 6.5 points per game. And Michaela Reynolds, who was mainly the 6th man, you could say, off the bench, 5.9 points per game for Reynolds. The 3 juniors that I see that need to lead the way for this squad, Courtney Walker will likely be the top dog on this team. Honorable mention, all PAC player last year, 12.1 points per game, shot nearly 35% from beyond the arc. Kelsey Mintel, 8.8 points per game, 7 rebounds per game. So nearly averaging a double-double if the numbers get up a little bit. Then Taylor Stinnett only averaged 1.8 points per game. It was mainly a bench player. She could see her role increase now that she's one of the so-called leaders on this squad, being one of the 3 juniors and one of the 3 oldest players on it. She only had 1 start in 24 games played last season. So another building block year, but with a lot of young talent for Bethany, there is something to work with.
Yeah, and those teams from years past for Bethany, I mean, they were physical. They were a team that liked to do it between the blocks. And then you had a few really, really talented 3-point shooters. And I'm curious to see how that team is going to develop, because it seemed like the 3-point game is what they relied on heavily last year. But speaking on 3-point game, the Chatham Cougars have always been really talented at shooting a long ball. And they're led by David Sauer, and they lost in the semis to W&J last year. They were 15-11 overall, 7-9 in conference play. And there's no current roster on their website right now, as they're going to be putting that on here shortly as the season is coming up. But the one thing that we need to talk about is the fact that they had an extremely young team last year. However, they were led by one senior in Sarah Ungerman, and then the grad student Emily Ondo, who came out of nowhere. I mean, we kind of heard her name before the season, and then she exploded. 18.5 points per game, one of the league leaders in points per game in the PAC last year. But, you know, this young team that's promising for this year and years to come, the fact that they're going to have that talent sort of be consistent. However, they lost 2 really key pieces to that offense and defensively as well. But the senior, Sarah Ungerman, last year averaged about 6 points per game, 54% shooting, and 5 rebounds per game with a season high of 15 points. And that will be missed. However, you need to look for, again, we don't have a roster, so we're just, you know, speculating that this will, you know, who will be playing and who will be returning. But we're expecting to see Caitlin Fertig, who averaged about 18 points per game and was right behind Emily Ondo in scoring on that team. And then one that I'm super excited about, because I like announcing, obviously, shooting threes and having those calls. They're always the most exciting, in my opinion, the occasional dunk from the men's side. But, you know, Riley D'Angelo is such a talented 3-point shooter, averaged about 12 points per game last year. And she was making, you know, 3 to 4 3-pointers a game. She was attempting around 9 or 10. So a 37% shooting percentage, but, you know, she's still young. It's somebody that we're going to be able to see for a couple more years. And I think that if you can get the deep ball working and have some of those key pieces return to you, and also develop some of the youth, I think this is still going to be a very scary team.
Yeah, and I think the Chatham Cougars are one of the most fun teams in the PAC to cover. As you said, Rob, they love to shoot the three, and that's always something fun about any squad. And shooters shoot. So even if they're having an off game, they're going to keep doing it. And Coach David Sauer is becoming one of the best young coaches in PAC basketball, both men's or women's. He really has done a nice job turning that program into what I believe is a contender in the PAC.
Yeah, and a young coach that's, still learning his way through this program, but, has a lot of talent to work with. And Donnie, it's time to welcome the newest member of the PAC, the Franciscan Barons. And not too many people know about this school and know about this team. What can we expect from them heading into this season?
Well, last season, Franciscan, the newbie to the President's Athletic Conference, coming from the Allegheny Mountain Collegiate Conference, 10-15, 8-12 in conference play. However, they did play 4 games against PAC teams in 2019-2020. They went 2-2 in those games. The losses came to 2 of the better teams in the PAC, Chatham and Grove City. It was a 74-47 loss against the Cougars, and then a 79-34 loss against the eventual PAC champions, the Grove City Wolverines. The wins came against Bethany and Geneva, 52-49 to kick off the season at Bethany, and then a 74-67 win against the Golden Tornadoes. 2 of their top scorers, however, did depart. Abby Barrel averaged nearly 15 points per game. She shot over 81% from the line. Caitlin Sonberger, 7.2 points per game. Both of those players gone, but a couple of returning pieces for the Barons. Angela Starr, the sister of Monica Starr, if you recognize that name, former Waynesburg women's basketball player, a point guard for Coach Sam Jones there. 12.2 points per game last year for Starr, 7.7 rebounds per game. She shot pretty well from long range, 35.7%. Estelle Leon, 11.6 points per game, 10.6 rebounds per game. So she averaged a double-double, and you would like to think those numbers would go up. Also had 59 assists, which led the team, and shot a clean 80% from the free throw line. This is a new squad, Rob, but I expect them to fall right in the middle of the pack of the PAC. Hard to judge anything fairly, though, during a pandemic, but I think the Barons will fit right in for years to come.
Yeah, we're very pleased to have them in the PAC, and we've heard that name a lot. Though it seems like the PAC teams often play Franciscan, a handful of them throughout the year, or moving on to the ECAC tournament. There's been occasions where Franciscan's been in the mix of those as well in years past. But Donnie, we're going to get to our final team here. It's the Grove City Wolverines, the champions of last year, led by Shelly Foose. And what a team. I mean, it was a really exciting year, it seemed like, for Grove City. In every sport, they were doing well. And women's basketball, they were on full display. I mean, the discipline, the attentiveness to detail, and it seemed like this team had it all figured out. And from the very beginning, you knew that they were going to make a run for the PAC tournament, and eventually won it all in the end. But just some exciting news for them. I saw on their Twitter, they were posting it online that they just got a brand new locker room. So maybe that instills some sort of confidence to them moving forward into this season, coming off last. Hey, if you win a PAC championship, you might as well get something new, right? So, this is going to be a team that's going to definitely enjoy that, but, they're going to have a target on their back. And they beat Westminster in the tournament in the first game, 70-58, then beat W&J in the championship by 2 points, 54-52. Donnie, I know that you were on that call, that game. As close as it was, it definitely seemed like it was Grove City's game to lose.
Yeah, and it had a really crazy ending. Not sure if you caught any part of that game, but there was a point where there were some clock discrepancies and foul discrepancies, and I know it really made Coach Foose start to pull her hair out a little bit, but her squad held on, and as they did all season long, and as they've done her entire career at Grove City, the defense was there whenever it had to be.
Yeah, and that defense is one of the best in the PAC, was the best last year, and I'm sure will continue for any Shelley Foose coached team. But they finished with the second best PAC record last year behind St. Vincent. They were 14-2 in the conference and finished 25-3 overall. So just 3 losses last year. They're a team that is welcoming 5 freshmen, so they're bringing in the youth, but they have a lot of key players returning. Jess Bowen, 15 points per game, 45% field goal shooting, and led the team in minutes last year at 27. Allison Podkol's returning, averaged about 10 points per game, 3rd on the team in field goal percentage. Jordan McConnell, she is someone you certainly want to look out for because she's a facilitator. She averaged the most assists on the team, 3 assists per game, top on the team in minutes, among the top in the team in minutes, I should say. And once you have that sort of facilitator with those, natural scorers, anything's possible. And she's tremendous on defense as well. But they did lose 2 solid seniors to graduation, and that was Kate Balcom, and she was fantastic. I mean, you can't say enough great things about her. 2nd on the team in scoring, averaged close to 15 points per game. She led the team in blocks and steals. And I think the one thing for her is that defensively, she was one of, if not the best defensive players in the PAC. She led the charge. She was a captain. She was very vocal. And, it was a pleasure watching her. And I think this team is going to miss that aspect, not necessarily based on the scoring aspect of her game, but the defensive part of her game was you couldn't describe it. It was almost unteachable.
She was probably the best defensive player, at least that I've seen in PAC women's basketball. I know there's a longer history than what I've seen for the last 5 years or so, but Kate Balcom is right up there.
They also lost Jess Book as well, so they lost some size down low. But Donnie, we covered all the teams here on the women's side and PAC play. And before I get to the close, I hope everything's going well with you. Good health, and this is going to be a very crazy season. A lot of things we won't predict, and I think we kind of just need to ride it out, and we're excited for it. I know a lot of people need to stay patient through this process, but Donnie, if there's anything you want to add here towards the end, I'm just happy that we're playing and we're getting something normal in our life, and we're able to go back to this routine and just watch and announce basketball.
Yeah, I just have to echo everything you just said, and just say that I'm excited for the season. Also, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, Donnie. Well, that does it for us here on the first episode of the 2021 basketball preview show. Special thanks to PAC owner Randy Gore, Commissioner Joe Onderico, and of course you, Donnie Chedrick. Next and final episode, we will discuss the men's conference and showcase our network's 10th anniversary video. And trust me, you do not want to miss that. So just again, everybody stay safe, and we'll see you next time right here on the PAC Sports Network.